Thanks for that, Sheila. Maybe we'll just give it one more minute and then I'll get going. So hopefully everyone's is having a wonderful Friday. Hey, well, I might make a start and we'll see how we go. All right. Has that come up on screen? Can everyone see the
Yes, Amanda.
presentation? And it's in slide view? Cool.
Yeah.
Fabulous. All right. Thanks everyone for coming along today. So I'm using today just to provide a bit of an overview around species management. I'm sure a lot of the content of this presentation will be familiar to many of you, but sometimes it's useful just to revisit processes and have an opportunity to ask questions and a bit of a discussion. So whilst it is a presentation, I'm happy for people to ask questions as we go along, or if you think of things, just chip in and put your points forward. So I'll get going. This first slide has a picture of a coati, and I've just got the coati up there because whilst we don't have favourite animals, coatis are one of my favourites. So just as a bit of an icebreaker, how's that going? And I'll start the talk by acknowledging that I'm giving this presentation from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I work and live on these lands. And it's just a moment to reflect on the care for country that's been provided for the past 60,000 years. And I'd like to extend my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are taking part in this presentation. So just some scene setting. What will I be talking about today? So a little bit about ZAA's approaches to species management, the various roles that we have to support species management, some of our key documents like RSPs and annual reports. Oh, hold on a moment, just one moment and I'll be back. I'm just doing this because I know you're working. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Sorry, everyone. Nothing like just having a delivery when you're in the middle of a talk, but that's okay. So regional species plans and annual reports, thinking about some of the activities that the team does behind the scenes, and then thinking about how all of you can help support species management, then a bit more time for discussion. So first of all, the regional species planning and management policy. So I really encourage everyone, if you haven't read this document, please read over it. It's only a few pages long, but it's the framework for all that we do. And our approach within the Zoo and Aquarium Association is to take a holistic approach to species planning. So effectively, really, every species that we house at our zoos is managed. Even for those species that we might consider as phase-out species, that's being managed to a zero population. So we really want to think about how all of us as members of the association can work together and support those priority species, whilst also acknowledging that individual zoos may have individual identities which might lead them to house a species that perhaps other zoos don't house. Then thinking about how the association provides support for that regional species list that we have. And the policy also identifies the expectations of members. So the actions that members or those taking part in species management programs, the actions that we expect of them. Any questions or comments around the policy? We'll move on then. Just get that moving. For the carnivore tag, probably the key species planning document is the regional species plan. So every one of the tags has a regional species plan. If it isn't yet produced, it's in development. So what the regional species plan does, that identifies our agreed regional priorities. So which species is the association going to put resources in to support? We know that within our region, we have a fairly small number of zoos compared with, say, the North American AZA or the European EAZA, and that we have very small populations and limited number of spaces. So as a region, we want to try and optimise our approaches to species planning so that if we're housing a species, that population is likely to succeed. So our regional species plan identifies those priorities to help support that best use of the spaces that we have available. It identifies the various approaches to species management that we might deploy for a particular population, accepting that these approaches might change in time. So, for example, if a population is fairly new to the region, it might be an establishment phase and we may be wanting to grow the population fairly quickly. Or if it's a species that's been housed in the region for a long period of time, then it may have exceeded the planned population targets and we're more in a holding pattern. So different approaches may be required. And I'm sure you're all familiar with various tools such as maximum avoidance of inbreeding or use of mean kinship. So just identifying those key requirements for each population and how we manage them. And key requirements may not only be applied to actually managing the population, but approaches to animal care. So are we housing the species in single sex groups? Do we keep males and females together all the time? How do we implement reproduction? How do we manage reproduction? What sort of reproductive controls we might use? All of those sorts of things. And then, in particular, with our regional species plans, we want to try and identify the conservation outcomes that we're delivering. So is there a link, a direct link with wild populations? Do the populations that we house here in our zoos support wild populations? Or alternatively, are there other ways that we achieve conservation outcomes, such as conservation advocacy or conservation education? So really the outcome of the regional species plan is to ensure that we have programs with purpose. And the key purpose is really supporting conservation outcomes or alternatively sustaining our zoo populations. Anyone want to jump in? Any comments, questions? Gail, any more thoughts from you around regional species plans?
No, I think you've covered it there, Amanda. I think they're really just a guiding document to show what are the priorities species that we're wanting to manage collaboratively across members and looking at why and how we're going to do it. So this is the first iteration of the RSPs that we've got. We'll look at doing a sort of a revision of them in a couple of years' time for the carnivore tag. But that's also available up on our portal. So I'll pop a link to that in the chat so people can have a look, see if they haven't seen it before.
Thanks, Gail. Species management roles. So I'm sure you're all familiar with these, but I'll just run through them anyway. So supporting the association with species management, we have a whole suite of volunteer roles that people have the opportunity to take on board. Plus, we're supported by the amazing team of ZAA staff. So the program host is the institution that, as the name implies, agrees to host a species management program. So that means that the institution is committed to making resources available to deliver that program. So, for example, I'm the species coordinator for cotton top tamarins. So, Zoos Victoria is the program host for that program, and they're committed to giving me time to work on that program and to ensure that I have resources such as access to ZIMS or to PMX and all the other bits and pieces. So, that's program host. Then we have our taxon champions. So a taxon champion may be looking after one particular species, or it could be multiple species that perhaps fall within a particular genus or a particular class. The taxon champion is a less formal position. Usually their tag comes up with who is going to take on the role of the taxon champion. And the taxon champion might be monitoring a program, providing some sort of oversight around things like the need to breed, just tracking the numbers for a particular species or taxon, and potentially making some recommendations around moving animals around. So it's sort of just a high level, informal approach to keeping an eye on how a species goes. Then the next one, stud bookkeeper. So as the name implies, the stud bookkeeper looks after the stud book, and that has that role of ensuring that there's accurate records about individuals who are part of the program. So we'll talk a little bit about that one more later on. The species coordinator, their role is to analyse the data that's in the stud book and then make recommendations around breeding the species and also animal transfers. For stud bookkeeper and species coordinator, often one person completes both of those tasks. So it's just really useful to understand the different roles of stud bookkeeper and species coordinator. So the species coordinator is the one who's doing the analysis and making the recommendations, whilst the stud bookkeeper is maintaining the stud book. The process for all of our species management programs is that which will be the Animal Management Committee, kind of calls for an expression of interest for a zoo or an institution to be the program host. And then that institution will nominate who the stud bookkeeper and species coordinator is. So once all of the, after advertising for expression of interest, then all of the applications come in. Then what happens is the tag conveners will review those applications, will make some recommendations, and that will go to the Animal Management Committee for formal endorsement to appoint a program host and the stud bookkeeper and species coordinator. Any questions about that or comments? Anything else? Gail, do you want to jump in and add anything further? Or?
I might just add that
Yeah.
in the carnivore tag, we've got a couple of species which are managed as RSMPs, but also form part of a wider GSMP. So if we're looking at Sumatran tiger and red panda, so we have a program host and a coordinator who manages our regional program, but the stud book data set is an international data set, which is managed collaboratively with YASA and AZA, and the stud book is sort of managed or overseen by WASA rather than our office. So there's a few little difference in species like that.
Yes, thanks, Gail. Then the tag convener. So as the name implies, the tag convener convenes the tag, and we all know what tags are. So we've got tag conveners for the carnivore tag, and tag conveners are also appointed by the Animal Management Committee. Again, we'll ask for expressions of interest and people can apply for that position, and then someone's appointed. We have the Animal Management Committee. So the Animal Management Committee provides oversight of the association's species management programs. Membership of the Animal Management Committee seeks to capture, I guess, the diversity of members of the association. So we want to make sure that there are members on the Animal Management Committee that come from Australia and from New Zealand, that they come from big zoos and smaller zoos, government-run zoos, privately operated zoos, and that they also represent the aquarium industry. So we want to make sure that we've got a diverse backgrounds of people who are on the Animal Management Committee. And as with other committees, expressions of interest are called. People can apply to take on those roles, and members of the Animal Management Committee are appointed by the board. And then finally, just I've got mention of the ZAA board. So clearly, our species management programs are part of the association's activities. So we have the board, I guess, providing oversight of what the Animal Management Committee does. We have a board representative on the committee. So at the moment, the board representative on the Animal Management Committee is Nick Boyle from Taronga Zoo. So that way we have that assurance that what the Animal Management Committee is doing aligns with the strategy and direction for the Zoo and Aquarium Association. So that's just a really quick overview of the key species management roles and how they kind of all interlink with one another, and just acknowledging that we all sit under the association's board. Any questions there? Thoughts, discussions? All right, I shall keep moving on. So just drilling a little bit deeper into stud books. So for stud books, at the moment, regional stud books are maintained on Zim's for Stud Books. Previously, we used some different software called Sparks, but now we're just all maintaining our stud books on Zim's for Stud Books. And I think I can't reiterate or stress enough that all of our species management programs, the success of them is really underpinned by good animal records. So as members who are participating in species management programs, make sure that all of your animal records are up to date, that they're complete. Do your best to ensure that everything is accurate, especially information such as the parents of animals. Don't assume if you're not sure. Make sure that animal records capture those sorts of things, such as when you've made an assumption or if you're 100% certain about things, because our stud books and then our species management programs are only as good as the data that's contained within them. So I've just got a little snapshot there of on the left-hand side that's just showing some of the various stud books that I'm involved with, and as primate tag co-convener, I have access to be able to view the various primate stud books. So sorry I haven't got carnival ones up there, but that just gives you a little idea. So any questions around stud books? Everyone's very quiet. Maybe everyone's eating their lunch or something. So next is thinking about how we analyse our populations. So as I mentioned previously, this is a task that species coordinators complete. I've got a little snapshot from a screen from PMX. So PMX is the name of the software that we use to analyse populations. So we export the data from Zim's for Stud Books into PMX. And then using PMX, we can consider the genetics of populations, we can consider the demographics or the numbers of the populations, We can look at reproductive planning. So, for example, how many breeding pairs we need to recommend each year if we want to either maintain the population at its current numbers or if we want to increase population size. PMX can help model how many pairs we need. We can also look at, in order to maintain goals such as proportion of genetic diversity within the population, do we need to add new founders to the population? And if we do, how many founders do we need to add and how frequently? So there's modelling to do that. And we can also look at the impact of different breeding pairs. So if I was to nominate, say, 2 tigers to breed, is that going to increase genetic diversity or decrease genetic diversity for the population, or what impact it might have on mean kinship? So PMX is a really powerful tool that allows us to gain insights into the outcomes associated with having different breeding pairs or the number of breeding pairs that we have for each year. So really it's a way of modelling to inform our planning. So I always like to remind myself that PMX is a modelling tool, and often what happens may not actually align 100% with what PMX tells us the outcomes will be. But definitely, I mean, that's things like, for example, if we think about survivorship of young, PMX might come up with predictions based on sort of the past 100 years of data, whereas if we know that we've got improved survivorship of young, it might be a little different from what the modelling tells us. But clearly things like genetics, the population are all accurate. Having said that, just being mindful that we do tend to make assumptions in stud books if we don't always know the complete ancestry of individuals. So again, that goes back to the importance of having accurate animal records. Right. Okay. Anything you might want to add there?
No, I don't think so, Amanda. I think you've covered it all there.
No, it's very quiet, so hopefully you are listening to this and this is of interest and it's not just like, oh my goodness, I know all of this. So our annual reports and recommendations, this is one of the key documents for species planning. So the annual report and recommendation highlights the plans for the coming 12 months. So for example, what animal transfers are going to take place in the coming 12 months or what breeding recommendations have been made for the coming 12 months. The annual report and recommendation also tracks performance of the previous 12 months. In particular, looking at, I think it's important to focus on conservation goals. What are the conservation goals associated with the program and how they are tracking? It's always useful to take the time to have a look at performance trends. So you can see that I've popped up the last year's annual report and recommendation for lions. And we have the pie chart on the front page, which shows in green the things that are tracking well. So for lions, we can see that population or demography, husbandry, recruitment, and research and communications are all tracking well. And then on the left-hand side where it's red, we've got conservation, education, genetics, welfare, sustainability, and administration are in red. So that just means that they're not meeting their goals. So by doing that and identifying where a program is performing well or where a program's not meeting planned targets, it helps us to identify what actions we might want to take in the coming 12 months. I know quite a lot of people might just jump to the recommendations and read what transfers my institution needs to make for the coming 12 months or what breeding my institution needs to complete for the coming 12 months. But I really encourage people to take the time to read over the documents and to try and gain an understanding of all of the content that's in them. There's a huge amount of work that species coordinators do to complete these documents. And yeah, I'd just like to thank all the species coordinators who are listening in for the work that they do. Any questions there? Anything? So just thinking about how people as members or as participants in our species management programs, how can they help species coordinators with what they're doing? So as I've previously said, and I'll keep saying, make sure you have accurate and current animal records. So just really focus on those. It really helps if you can let species coordinators know as soon as possible of any changes to animals that your institution houses. So that might be any births or any deaths, or if you've determined the sex of individual animals, just let species coordinators know. Of course, for those of you who do subscribe to Species 360 and make use of ZIMS, that information is automatically conveyed to stud bookkeepers, but sometimes it's great just to send an email through to a species coordinator and let them know whether or not a transfer is proceeded or animals have given birth. It's always nice to get that information and find out about it rather than reading about it on Facebook or something like that. I know everyone's really busy, but if you do have the time to share that information, it's much appreciated. Then another way of really supporting programs and helping out species coordinators is if a species coordinator does come to you with a recommendation about an animal transfer or the need to breed or the need to no longer breed, really take on board what the species coordinator is saying. Provide the species coordinator with any relevant information. So, for example, if there are perhaps behavioural concerns for an individual animal, or maybe an individual animal's recently been diagnosed with some sort of health issue, share that information with the species coordinator so that maybe there's an alternative animal that can be used, or, you know, try and avoid those situations where an institution wants to continue breeding even though there's no real requirement for breeding to support the program, or an institution wants to keep housing an animal when to support the program, transferring it somewhere else might be of benefit. Yes, so make sure your concerns are evidence-based and definitely have that dialogue with the species coordinator. I think having those good relationships with species coordinators really helps with resolving things and understanding any matters that might pop up. And of course, if there are some conservation programs, whether it's conservation education, conservation advocacy programs, or maybe a project in range states to support the wild population, get on board and support those conservation projects. And that increases the conservation output of our programs. So really, as participants in species management programs, if you can enable and deliver recommendations, that's really appreciated. But I just mentioned the annexing process, and I apologise, I've used just an annex form that's got the old association logo on it. I put this presentation together yesterday. Yeah, this was the first one I found, so sorry about that. I'll make sure I update it if I do this talk again. But the annex process, as I hope all of you know, for all of our species management programs, individual animals must stay within the Zoo and Aquarium Association membership unless the Animal Management Committee approves that animals can be transferred out of the association. So I guess the exception there would be for recovery programs where individual animals are released, or those situations where, for example, we might want to transfer an animal from association species management programs to a management program that's operated by another regional association. But aside from that, pretty much animals need to stay within the ZAA membership if they're part of a species management program. We know there are times when people may want to remove animals from breeding populations, for example, um, use of permanent contraception. And if that's the case, then an annex request form needs to be approved by the Animal Management Committee. So what you need to do if you're wanting to remove an animal from a species management program, contact the species coordinator and then work out how to develop the annex request form. That's then submitted to the office and reviewed, and it will come to the Animal Management Committee for approval. So the key thing that we think about is what would be the impact of removing the individual animals from the breeding population on our capacity to deliver that species management program. So it might seem a bit of a tedious process, but it's one that ensures the robustness of our programs and means that, in the past, or, before we had this process, people might have been, castrating males, and then we've looked at the population, and it turns out that 80% of males in the population have been castrated, and there's not too many breeding males to call on. So that's one of the reasons why we have the annex process, just to make sure that we continue to maintain the robustness of our populations. Anything further to add to that, Gail?
Just reiterating the contacting the coordinator aspect that you mentioned, Amanda. Obviously, annex applications generally come from the institution, but they should be put in the context of the program. So it's really important that you're not just looping in the coordinator at the end, but actively involving them at the start of the decision-making process when you're considering annexing an individual.
Thanks, Gail. I then wanted to highlight just all of the work that the amazing ZAA SMP staff complete in the background. So James and Gail and Mika, they do heaps of stuff. So we should just thank them whenever we can. They review all of our annual reports and recommendations. They provide training for staff. There are regular meetings that occur between association staff and government agencies, and that might help with things such as trying to progress CITES permits or to try and progress imports. The association staff provide support with things that may need agency approval. So within Australia, there's a requirement for CCPs or cooperative conservation programs for species that are included in Category 1 of CITES, and things like the import risk analysis that we have in Australia. And I should have popped on IHS, the import health standards that we have in New Zealand. So just providing some support with that, or if there are questions that affect a whole program, then providing support to try and resolve things. The association's also looking at ways for providing opportunities for our zoos to further support conservation outcomes. So that's particularly for Australian and New Zealand native species. If there's a need for, say, ex situ management, then ensuring that our members have the opportunity to be on board early on in the process. The team also develops various processes to help us with species management, and of course maintains CPOS, which is a really useful database that helps us with species planning, so we can see what current numbers are, planned numbers are, number of groups that different zoos hold, and just some guidance around current tag priorities. So yeah, the wonderful association staff really provide heaps of leadership and support for our species management programs.
And Amanda, I'd just like to add, and all the support that the TAG co-conveners get from ZAA office is brilliant.
Jill? Good. I love having some positive feedback. That's great. I thought I'd do a couple of what ifs. So, just thinking about the various institutions who are taking about part in our species management programs. I know we do tend to track the success, or we track the percentage of recommendations from the previous year that have been delivered. So what if I don't achieve all of the recommendations? What if I don't deliver on those transfer recommendations? Generally, we know there are good reasons why a recommendation won't be delivered. So again, if you continue to have that dialogue with species coordinators and let them know how things are going, then that just helps species coordinators to understand what might be holding up transfer recommendations, and maybe we can provide support, or if things are not getting resolved, such as maybe delays in getting permits for international transfers, then we can have some dialogue with the association team to see if perhaps they can make use of their contacts within government agencies to help resolve that. So we totally get that sometimes recommendations don't always happen within the 12-month time frame. Non-recommended breeding. As a species coordinator, I've had several examples where I've had one of the participants in a program ring me up, and they've been really anxious and are really worried, and they'll ring me up and they go, "Oh, I've got to tell you that I've got this breeding where we didn't know it was going to happen, but it's turned out that the mother has bred with her son and blah, 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 blah." And they're really anxious that I'm going to be angry or chastise them, or they've done something incredibly wrong. Whereas if they followed the recommendations and it was something totally not unacceptable, something that was totally unexpected, maybe it was contraception failed or something like that, then don't worry. I mean, whilst clearly we want to avoid non-recommended breedings, again, having that good dialogue, that good relationship with species coordinators will support you through those processes and come up with, what are we going to do with the resulting animals, those sorts of things. But don't be scared. If something doesn't turn out the way that it should, get in touch with your species coordinator and we'll work things out and support you. If there is a need to change social group, for example, there are signs of breakdown or whatever, again, get in touch with the species coordinator before you do anything. We know on occasions if there are significant injuries or massive aggression and you need to step in and move animals out of groups, you may do that before you consult with the species coordinator, but let them know as soon as possible. Because often we know once you take animals out of groups, you can't get them back in, and then we've got those situations of individual animals being housed alone, and then species coordinators have to try and find other animals to pair up with them and all that sort of thing. So try and have that dialogue before you take action. Transfer animals to non-ZAA members. As we said before, that's something that just shouldn't happen. So please do not move any animals that are part of species management programs to beyond ZAA membership unless there is Animal Management Committee approval to do so. And similarly, permanent contraception, if there is a need to permanently contracept an animal, that should go through the annex request. The only exception would be, for example, you might have an animal that's had some issues giving birth and there's a need for emergency cesarean or something like that. Then let the species coordinator know as soon as possible. But I think the whole thing to remember is if you're acting with good intent, then we'll listen to the reasons why some of these unplanned events or events that are not within or don't align with the agreed recommendations of the annual report happen, then we'll listen to them and understand the reasons why. So again, that's another reason why it's just really useful to try and have that good dialogue and build those relationships with species coordinators. Any questions, or anyone want to share their experiences or have anything else they would like to raise here? All right, getting involved. So we probably know all of this, but I'll just reiterate it again. It's great to see people coming along to tag drop-in sessions. This is just, if nothing else, it's a way of getting to know people who are part of the tag, getting familiar with names. We can put faces to names. And it's just a really nice way to hear from everyone. And please, like this session, um, they you get out of them what you put into them, and it's really great to try and have some discussions rather than just me sitting here banging on and telling you stuff all the time. I love to hear from people and to hear of your experiences, because that helps us, like the animal management committee, maybe refine our practices or to shape training for staff or whatever it is. So yeah, get involved with the drop-in sessions. I can't stress enough the value of taking part in tag workshops, because that's the venue too where we might decide on priority species, those sorts of things. It's just really valuable to be involved with them and hear about what's going on. As I said, getting to know your colleagues, maybe considering things like taking on the role of a taxon champion. Often tags might have small informal groups like a husbandry group or a working group to address a particular thing. It might be nutrition review or whatever it is. So please pop your hand up, get involved in them. And again, it's an opportunity to work with others from different institutions and get to know them. I've spoken quite a bit about working with people at different institutions, but also take the time to work with those at your own institutions. So maybe you might be keen on getting involved with ultimately becoming a species coordinator, and your passion might be carnivores, but perhaps you're someone at the institution where you work is a species coordinator for a bird species. Maybe you can get involved and start helping to support the stud book for that and build up your skills in using ZINs for stud books, get to know how to do annual reports and recommendations. And then perhaps when a carnivore stud book comes up, then you can switch and put your hand up for that. So definitely look for those who are working at your zoo and contributing to species management roles and just being mentored by them. Again, just keep reading all the documents that we put out to build your understanding of our association processes and what we do. So whether it's policies, the regional species plan, the annual reports and recommendations, or other documents, take the time to read them. And I guess too, if you are really thinking about taking on the role of species coordinator, we know that not all programs are the same. Some are really complicated, some are simpler. So if it's your first program, look for one of the simpler ones, or maybe do it in partnership with someone who has more experience. So definitely just that need to build relationships so that you've got support and you can have some mentoring. Now, I was hoping, I can't really see who is out there, but do we have any carnivore species coordinators out there at the moment who would like to just share a couple of thoughts on things that help them as a species coordinator? Jodie, I'm going to call on you. I know you're not a carnivore species coordinator, but do you want to just share one or two things that really help you as species coordinator from members?
From members, I think, as you said, when people get in contact with you and let you know straight away when they've had births and deaths and stuff like that, because I do manage species that well, one of the species anyway, things happen often. I'm in the stud book a lot, but it's really handy when people get in contact with you, because then you can actually find out why, or if they've lost an animal, are they looking for another one straight away? And all of those things can happen much quicker if people are in contact. And having those good relationships, always call up. I was working with another species coordinator, and I happened to say something like, oh, have you heard from all of your program participants? And they said, oh no, I haven't heard from all of them. And I said, oh, have you called them? And they said, oh, no. And I said, oh, just pick up the phone. And the easiest thing sometimes is just to pick up the phone and have those conversations with people.
Fabulous. Thanks for that. Just seeing who else is out there. Kelly Rainbow, now you've been a species coordinator. Would you like to share something that helped you as a species coordinator? Maybe she's not out there.
I think she's just dropped off.
She got scared when I
You scared her and she ran away.
I know. Let me see who else is out there.
I think the other good thing as well is having that good relationship with SMP. And I am lucky because I am also a co-convener for the Oz Mammal Tag, so I do have like regular updates. But having those interactions means that you know the people involved. You can just easily contact people. So yeah, forming relationships I think is a really big one.
Great, thanks, Jodie. I'm just kind of trying to pick on some people. Mark Turner, I know you're not a species coordinator, but I'd like to hear a perspective from someone who takes part in species management programs. Is there an example of a way in which a species coordinator has helped you, or maybe some problem solving that you've done with a species coordinator?
Hey, Amanda. Yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned the annexing stuff before, and we've had to go through that a couple of times when we set up our bachelor zebra herd, and then obviously with our porcupine mass breeding that we had, unplanned mass breeding, and that was quite helpful, just consulting with like when we were doing the zebra stuff, consulting with Sophie, she was very helpful working through that situation. I think it's quite good too, because if there are any problems or concerns, then speaking to the coordinator is a great way to get some more input and background. Just to sort of, even if you think you're on the right path, it's always good to get a second opinion from someone who's managing the program. So yeah, I mean, they're great. It has changed over the years since I've been in the industry, but I think it's definitely a lot better now.
Good. Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that things are better. I think they are too. I just like the way that I think it's a lot more collaborative and thinking or consideration of other things like animal welfare and conservation outcomes. So definitely reflecting on the tag workshops that we've recently had, I think we've come a long way.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the tag workshops are really useful too, Amanda, as you mentioned, because it's an opportunity for us to have a bit more of a discussion. I think having the discussion in person is often a lot more beneficial in my mind than doing it through emails and all the rest of it. You get more feedback, but yeah, definitely I find that it's a lot more collaborative nowadays, more so than probably it used to be.
Great. That's good to hear. All right. Well, Tamsin, are you out there at the moment? I'd just love to hear your perspectives of something that you have found good about species programs or species coordinators helping you, or something you think we could do differently.
Hi, was that for me?
Yeah.
Hi. It's been an interesting journey for us. You know, sometimes I still feel like the new kid on the block, and then I look back and realize we've been doing this we've just had our 20th anniversary. So no, we're not the new kids, but still often feel like that. And I think, especially for small operators, it's so useful being able to just pick up the phone. And sometimes we forget and we battle along on our own with something which is actually proves to be easily solvable, like social housing, like having a single aggressive animal, like having an animal die on the program. And although there weren't any immediate breeding recommendations, there's always, but are they going to be calling on this animal? And being a small team, often our admin isn't as great as it should be. And just being able to pick up the phone. I mean, Jodie's saved my skin so many times when we've been in a situation which we thought was unsolvable, or we just can't house the animals we've got and we've got to make a plan. So this is where, for me, that's the most valuable thing. Although, because we're not, except for bilbies and a couple of new programs we're in now, we're not actively breeding, although we're part of the program. And just helping to make, having somebody to share that decision making with is hugely valuable.
Thanks, Tassin. That's much appreciated. I'll do a couple more people and then I'll wrap up. Gareth, keen to hear your perspectives, if you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still here, Amanda. Thank you very much for a very informative talk. From my perspective, I'm pretty new to Australia, actually, and Australasia as a region. I actually really, really loved the tag meetings at Taronga. I think it's really well supported, and especially with yourself and James and Gail, you've been helping me through. I've also been in contact with Sheila. To reiterate, picking up the phone is amazing, and to also have you guys been really supportive of me. I've obviously shown interest in picking up a smaller program and getting more involved, and you've all been lovely. So thank you very much. So being new to the region and being mostly experienced across the YAZA sort of space, this is really, really lovely, and I hope to be more involved as we go forward.
Thanks, Gareth. And then last, Alex, calling on you. Would you like to share some perspectives around working with a species coordinator, or maybe he's there? Oh. All right, we might try Laura, or is it you out there?
Yeah. Hi, Amanda. Hello, everyone. Yeah, and I kind of echo what Gareth said. I am relatively new to the region. I come from the AZA world, and one of the things that's helped me so much, other than having the giraffe species coordinator and tag convener, I have both of the tag conveners here. I have the carnivores one and I have the ungulates one. So that's been incredibly helpful to me to have those people that I can call on for all sorts of different things. And then in addition with that change in the region for me, actually the ZAA model is really nice. It actually is helpful because it's so much smaller than what I'm used to in the US. So I think it's almost a lot easier to contact people and to have those conversations, especially those tag meetings. So I found that very helpful in my role here at Melbourne Zoo. So thank you everyone for all the help with that.
Thanks, Laura. All right, I'll bring this home. So I'll just go to just wrapping up. As this go to. So hopefully today, through this listening to this little talk, that it'll give all of you a little bit of a better understanding of our association structure for species management roles and work, and just how everything fits together. That a little bit more understanding around the fact that we have priority species and the reasons for having that and the outcomes that we're wanting. Just thinking about all the work that happens in the species management space, and hopefully just giving you some ideas about how to support our species coordinators and the species management programs, as well as the tremendous support that and work that takes place behind the scenes by the association staff. And most importantly, hopefully after today, you'll be more inspired to get on board and get involved with all that tags do. So just before we finish, are there any more questions, comments from anyone? Anyone have any questions, comments?
I put a question in the chat.
Okay, I just saw that there's something in the chat. What are the most...
Thanks, Jodie. What are the most frustrating things that species coordinator institutions do so we can stop doing those things? All our coordinators and institutions are lovely, but I think it probably loops back to the communication thing. You know, obviously we have annual reports that are put out, and we have certain timelines and things for those things. And I think sometimes people think Mika and I are chasing people around with a big stick going, please come on, get your own report in. And there's very legitimate reasons why things might be delayed or things might go wrong. So it's just being open and having that communication with us if there is an issue that's delaying things or people having troubles with, because we are really here to help people as much as possible in those spaces.
Great. Thanks, Gail. Yeah, and apologies. That's one of the things when I share screen, I can't read the chat. So I can see quite a few people have popped comments in the chat. So thanks heaps for all of them. And if there's any last call for questions?
One more question, Amanda. Can you do this talk for our tag at some stage?
Sure, I could.
That would be
You
awesome.
just have to delete all the carnivore slides. You know, we want some control over what we're producing here, Amanda. But a big thank you to Amanda and Gail, and for everyone who's attended. I just wanted to say that these sorts of informative conversations that, Amanda, you've brought people in by asking questions and getting them on board are really helpful. We will be putting this on our Google Drive. So for those who have missed this talk or want to replay it, it'll be on the Google Drive probably over the weekend sometime. And feel free to drop us an email anytime if you want information on, you know, email addresses for stud book coordinators or species coordinators. We can definitely put you in contact with those guys if you don't already have all that information. But once again, Amanda, really brilliant talk, and we appreciate you giving up your time to help us out with the carnivore and small exotic tag. You too, Gail. Love your work.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Sheila.
organising it, Sheila, and Rebecca. Thanks for all your do. And you know me, I'll talk about species planning all day. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks all. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks, Amanda.
You're welcome.
I think it was really good.